Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Isles and we're standing in Vindolanda Roman Fort in Northumberland. Vindolanda is an amazing Roman fort just behind Hadrian's wall and was a part of the original defences before the Romans went slightly further to the north and built the Roman frontier of Hadrian's wall. I'm right now standing in what's called a vicus, the civilian settlement that was outside of the Roman fort. And this civilian settlement right here dates from the 3rd century because Vindolanda is a very complex site. The site started around about 85 AD and was occupied by units from across in the Low Countries, from Belgium and the Netherlands, before it was then abandoned, then rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt. So at this site here, there are 9 Roman forts, 4 of which are made of stone, the other 5 are all made of wood. And so whenever the fort was around about 8 to 10 years old, they would demolish the previous fort, cover the site in clay or soil, and then build on top of it, which has meant that in the earlier periods, there's amazing preservation of the history of this site. So what we'll do now is we're going to go through the 3rd century fort, and I'm going to point out some of the amazing things here at Vindolanda. So we'll just head this way now. So this right here is the west gate of the Roman fort, and the west gate would have been the entrance where obviously the soldiers, when they finished their work, would then be able to go out into the civilian settlement. And actually just outside the west gate there's a large building which has actually been interpreted as a tavern, so it seems that they could quickly go to a local pub and have drinks and food after they finished work, and then go out and see their friends and family in the other buildings there. In the later periods, in the 4th and 5th century, there was need for more accommodation within the fort because they abandoned the civilian settlement outside, and it seems that the friends, families and traders moved inside the fort with their soldiers, and so the gatehouses seem to have been turned into additional accommodation for the soldiers living here and were set out as houses. So that's one of the really cool changes that occurred during the period of Roman Vindolanda being in use. Right here we have some of the Barrack Blocks inside Vindolanda Roman Fort. And as I mentioned before, as the fort changed over the course of its use, the families seem to have moved inside because there's an increase in the amount of fines associated with women and children. These fines can go anywhere from hairpins right the way through to children's footwear and children's toys. And so we know there was a large population of women and children living alongside the soldiers inside the fort here as well. Sadly, there does seem to have also been a number of other things going on here too, and one of them is unfortunately that a young girl aged about 11 was murdered here at Vindolanda Roman Fort and was buried underneath the floors of one of the barrack blocks. It's still one of the mysteries of Vindolanda, but she seems to have either come from the Mediterranean or south of France. And so when she was up here, they interpreted it made that she may have been a daughter of one of the soldiers, or she may have also been a slave, but unfortunately seems to have been killed. On the far side, on the other side of the fort over there, you can also see there is a reconstructed shrine just over there, and also an altar. That shrine and altar was a temple to Jupiter Dolichanes, who was a very popular 3rd century deity who was associated with Jupiter, the Roman king of the gods, and Dolichanes, who was a Syrian version of Jupiter, closely associated with Baal, who is one of the gods of Syria and the Middle East at this time. And so there was a temple over there, probably sponsored by one of the commanding officers during the Roman period. And that was over there on the north side of the fort. We'll just move over here. As we walk along here, we're passing by the granaries of the Roman fort, and we're just going to go up here past the headquarters building. So right here we have the headquarters building, and the headquarters building is obviously, much like at Housesteads, the organizational center for the Roman fort. When you have the organizational center, you would have 4 offices at the top where all of the administration for the entire unit would be done. And there was also the strong room, which would contain the Shrine of the Standards, which is where the banners for every one of the centuries and the cavalry units would be. And alongside this as well, where the coins which paid the soldiers would be kept as well within the strong room. It's also where the commanding officer would meet with his staff every single day when he needed to give out his orders, and there was a small door between the headquarters building that also led into the commanding officer's house, so he would be quickly able to move between both buildings and to easily do his job, then go back home. We'll now move to the commanding officer's house and talk about that as well. So right here we're in the centre of the commanding officer's house, and much like at Housesteads, this would have been a large 3-storey high building which would have shown off the wealth and the power of the commanding officer who was stationed here. The interesting thing is that even the end of the 3rd century or the start of the 4th century, a small little church was built inside the commanding officer's house. And when this little church was built inside here, it shows that Christian worship had come up to the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. When Christian worship had come up here to the northern frontier of the Roman Empire, there was actually they studied it, and they saw that as they come to the end of the 4th century, the church is decommissioned, and at the top end of the church right here, there is a large fireplace put in place, so large that you could roast an entire ox in this location. For a while, this was interpreted to mean that basically Christianity had not taken hold here in northern Britain, and in fact, instead they were now roasting cattle in this location, showing a return back to the old pagan ways. But what we'll do now is we're going to go to a location that shows that this was not the case whatsoever. So we'll just head over to the most recent digs that have been done in the last 2 to 3 years. Yeah. This is the commanding officer's house. So right here, this is the location where the most recent of Vindolanda's digs are occurring right now. And when these digs are going on, they actually were digging in this location to discover about the Severan period. So then during the Severan period, which is about 208 to 212 AD, 211 AD, the Emperor Septimius Severus conducted a war against the people of northern Britain in Scotland. And when he conducted this war, Vindolanda changed in function, and they discovered a number of roundhouses on the site. And these roundhouses right here were very different to anything else in the Roman Empire, because the fact is the Romans very infrequently built round buildings, and so you had a load of roundhouses that were very similar to the native British style of housing here at this fort, and no one really knows why they were here. So it's a big mystery for Vindolanda. So they actually asked for permission to dig in this area to try and find out more about these roundhouses. And as they dug, they discovered a totally different thing that adds to Vindolanda's story. Because in this area right here next to me, they discovered a church that was built in the 5th century and was used for quite some time, and then another building beside of it, which also seems to be a church, as well as possibly hedges and a garden area, which suggests that there may have been something that looks very similar. So right here, this is the area of the current excavation, and Vindolanda have got a 4-year dig planned in this area and may extend it as well depending on what they discover. Now, the original reason for this dig was to discover the mystery of the period around the time of the Emperor Septimius Severus. So Septimius Severus conducted a war in northern Britain, in what is now modern-day Scotland, against the natives there. And during his time when he was emperor, this location here where we're standing was covered in roundhouses. When it was covered in this area with roundhouses, these archaeologists at Vindolanda wanted to find out why there were roundhouses on the site, because the Romans didn't build round houses. It was quite unusual. It's more of what you see within what's sometimes called the Celtic or the native British style of building. So they asked for permission to dig to discover that mystery in this area. So right here, just behind me, after they'd discovered the Severan roundhouses, they asked for 4 years of permission to dig on this site. And as they dug down through here, what they discovered was a new mystery. They think they found a 4th into 5th century church, and evidence that Vindolanda could have been used for Christian religious purposes into what people call the Dark Ages or the early Middle Ages. And so that's a really cool discovery right here, that there could possibly be a monastery on this site. After they dug through the church, they also discovered a lead chalice that was covered in Christian symbology from that period as well. Underneath the church into the 3rd century again, they've discovered a large cookhouse here and another identical building just behind it, which Vindolanda thinks may be a scholar or basically an officer's mess. So it'll be really interesting to discover what they find in this area as they do further digs. Just over in this direction here, they also have some of the later Roman cavalry barracks, where they also discovered a number of evidence for the Roman cavalrymen in the later periods of Vindolanda's occupation. While they were digging slightly further back over here as well, they also discovered a little miniature shrine dedicated to a Roman horse god. Possibly it could be either Mars, Mercury, or possibly Castor and Apollo, two very important gods associated with Roman cavalry. So there's loads of stuff coming out of this site, and every single year there are new discoveries, new finds at Roman Vindolanda that make this such an exciting place. And there could be over 100 years more of excavations that could be done on this site up here in northern Britain. So that's why Roman Vindolanda is such an exciting place. There's so much more, and the museum down in the valley below us for you to discover. So why not you get yourself along here to Roman Vindolanda and discover something amazing about this site on your visit. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and you'll join us for another episode in the near future. But in the meantime, look after yourself and stay well. Thank you very much.